In the winter of 1889, the town of Redemption Point was a place where justice froze faster than the river. A young woman named Lucy Albright carried nothing but courage and a copper mark on her hand that would seal her fate. One lie from a powerful family turned the entire town against her, and by sunrise, she was sentenced to hang. Watch till the end to uncover how destiny wasn't done with her, because the rope was about to break, and a stranger was about to ride in and change everything. Tell us where you're watching from, partner, and subscribe to keep us going. Now let's dive deep into the story.
The Arizona Territory town of Redemption Point was an unforgiving place in December of 1889. The wind, sharp as shattered glass, carried the scent of pine and desperation. Lucy Albright, a young woman whose spirit was far brighter than the threadbare clothes she wore, navigated the frost-crusted plank walkways. On the back of her left hand, just beneath the knuckles, lay a small copper-colored birthmark, a faint, unique map of an old secret. Lucy had been seeking employment, any honest labor, when she witnessed the impossible theft. It was just past midnight, and a sliver of moon offered scant illumination. She saw the heavy back door of Baker Thomas's establishment, the crust and crumb, being pried open. The figure who emerged, sweating and puffing despite the cold, was hauling two enormous burlap sacks, the size of small bodies. He was John Thorne, the mayor's only son, a man whose arrogance was rivaled only by his wastefulness. He was known for deep, dishonorable debts, and Lucy instantly knew the flour, the yeast and the heat of Baker Thomas's livelihood were about to pay for John's sins. 100 loaves of bread, enough to feed the entire mining camp for a week, had vanished. Lucy's feet froze to the spot. John, spotting her silhouette against the distant streetlight, dropped a sack with a heavy thud, his face contorted in a silent, furious snarl. Fear, raw and paralyzing, choked her breath. She didn't wait. She turned and fled into the dark alleys, the image of John's shadowed, cruel face etched into her memory. She knew she had seen a viper in the henhouse, and that no one in Redemption Point dared to cross the Thorne family. By dawn, the news had cracked the frigid morning silence. Baker Thomas, nearly in tears, stood beside Sheriff Jedediah Vance, whose weary face suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. The sheriff had no leads, only the frantic baker's estimate of the missing bread. It was John Thorne himself who strode into the sheriff's office that afternoon, smelling faintly of cheap whiskey and expensive cologne. He spun a meticulous, poisonous lie. "Sheriff, I saw her, plain as day. A girl, tall, kind of haunted look in her eyes, and she had a dark, almost copper patch on her left hand. A patch, mind you, couldn't miss it. Said she was starving. Then she ran, carrying those sacks like they were feather pillows." Sheriff Vance sighed, rubbing the stubble on his chin. He knew John was dirt, but he also knew Mayor Silas Thorne could turn Redemption Point into a grave for anyone who crossed his line. The search for the girl with the copper mark began immediately, fueled by the mayor's decree for swift, exemplary justice. Lucy spent the next few days in hiding, only venturing out to the dusty corner market where Old Man Hemlock sold meager, frostbitten vegetables. She felt the town's eyes, a heavy, judgmental weight, on her back. On the fourth day, the wind was particularly brutal, whipping her shawl around her head. She picked up a handful of potatoes, extending her left hand to Old Man Hemlock for change. His eyes, sunken and rheumy, focused not on the worn coins, but on the faint, copper-colored mark on her skin. A flash of recognition, the description from the wanted posters plastered across town, crossed his face. "Wait here, girl," Hemlock croaked, his voice tight. "Gotta fetch the proper currency from the back." Lucy felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. It was too late. Before she could bolt, Sheriff Vance and two deputies rounded the corner, their faces grim. Lucy didn't resist. The shock had turned her blood to ice. The trial was a mockery of justice, held in the town hall under the gilded seal of the Thorne family crest. Mayor Silas Thorne presided, his face a mask of civic indignation. Lucy, standing alone, had no counsel and no defense but the truth, which was buried under the weight of John's influence. "Where is your proof, girl?" Mayor Thorne thundered, leaning over the polished oak bench. "You accused the son of your mayor, a pillar of this community, of a crime that you were caught for, identified by your own distinct mark. Do you have a single soul who will testify to John Thorne's wickedness, or do you merely offer slander in exchange for your freedom?" Lucy's voice was dry, cracking with a pain deeper than tears. "I saw him, Your Honor. He owed money. He took the bread. I am innocent." But the mayor's verdict was swift, preordained and cruel. Guilty of grand larceny and high deception, she was sentenced to be publicly hanged on the morrow, a spectacle designed not for justice, but to showcase the absolute terrible power of the Thorne name. The drama of the sentencing was palpable. The townsfolk shifted uncomfortably, knowing the truth was a brittle thing in Redemption Point. The gallows stood in the center of the main street, a stark wooden skeleton silhouetted against the bruised pewter sky. A heavy silence, unnatural and absolute, had fallen over the collected crowd. They were grim-faced, half-pitying, half-terrified witnesses to the mayor's iron rule. Lucy was bound, the coarse hemp rope cool and rough against the sensitive skin of her neck. She closed her eyes, preparing to surrender her resilient spirit to the wind. "At least I know I didn't steal," she thought, a final small point of pride. John Thorne stood nearby, watching, a smug venomous smile curling his lip. The mayor gave the signal. The executioner, a nervous man named Earl, raised his hatchet toward the lever. In that very breath, a sound rougher than the blizzard that threatened to break, split the air. It was the thunder of hooves, followed by a sudden jarring halt. A man, as rugged and unkempt as a lone mountain juniper, rode a magnificent scarred roan horse directly into the cleared space. He didn't dismount. Instead he surged forward, kicking a worn heavy axe heel into the wooden stool that had been Earl's platform. The stool splintered with a sound like a rifle shot. In the same fluid, impossible motion, the man leaned precariously from his saddle, drew a gleaming hunting knife, and with a swift, brutal slash, cut the taut rope that encircled Lucy's neck. The rope fell. Lucy stumbled, gasping, into the arms of the stranger. This was Daniel Hawkwood, a former Texas Ranger, a man haunted by the loss of his own wife and daughter years ago to a forgotten border skirmish. He had retreated to a desolate canyon ranch, having chosen isolation because he believed he had nothing left to lose, a fearless man because he had already paid his ultimate toll. He wore a heavy, trail-worn duster, his eyes the color of cold flint, and the only thing colder was the resolve in his jaw. He held Lucy firmly, positioning her to his left, using her slight frame as a shield. His voice, unused to crowds, was a low, dangerous rumble. "Hold," Daniel commanded, his voice growing in volume, forcing the shocked crowd into deeper silence. He glared at the petrified Sheriff Vance, then leveled his gaze at Mayor Thorne. "For what crime?" Daniel demanded, his voice ringing with pure, unadulterated grit. "Was this woman sentenced to the rope?" the sheriff stammered, pointing at the shattered stool and the cut rope. "Larceny, 100 loaves of bread." She was proven guilty. Proven by whom? Daniel scoffed, his eyes sweeping over the pale, silent face of John Thorne. "Proven by a man who stands to lose nothing by her death. I saw the fear in your eyes, every last one of you. I see the sickness of this town. This girl," he gestured to Lucy, who was clinging to his coat, tears finally streaming down her face, "is the lamb of your corruption. I don't know her, but I know a lie when the stench of it hits my soul." His eyes, now burning with the fury of a man who remembers what justice feels like, met Lucy's. "Tell me the truth, girl, right here, right now, for everyone to hear." Lucy, heart racing, swallowed hard, and bolstered by his terrifying confidence, repeated her account. "It was John Thorne. I saw him with the sacks. He has turned his lie into a death sentence." Daniel looked back at the town. "You are afraid of the Thornes, but they have just sentenced an innocent woman to death. I will not stand for this silence. I will be her voice and make her proof." With a final terrifying look that promised destruction to anyone who moved, Daniel pulled Lucy onto the back of his powerful roan. They exploded out of Redemption Point in a cloud of dust and snow, heading west toward the desolate, rugged canyons. The journey to the lost spur was punishing. Lucy clung to Daniel, shivering against his powerful, stoic frame. The ranch was less a ranch and more a fortified cabin, a wooden scar tucked into a sheer rock face, protected from the world. Inside the cabin was Spartan, dominated by a large stone hearth. Daniel gave her water and hard tack, his movements economical, devoid of unnecessary warmth. "My name is Daniel Hawkwood," he finally said, his back to her as he stoked the fire. "You're safe here, Lucy Albright. You saw what you saw, and you got a raw deal. I'll keep you alive, but don't expect tea and sympathy. I don't host." Lucy, observing him, saw not a reckless hero, but a man profoundly tired. "Why did you do it, Daniel? You said you didn't know me." Daniel turned, his eyes piercing. "I know what it looks like when a town eats its own. I know what it looks like when power makes a mockery of the law. I used to wear a star, back in Texas. I lost everything, every reason to care, when I was fighting for a law that failed me. But watching them put that rope on your neck, it felt like watching the last scrap of decency die in this territory." "You saved my life," Lucy whispered. "I saved my own conscience," he corrected gruffly, though his demeanor softened slightly as he handed her a thick wool blanket. "Now rest. The world is coming for you, which means it's coming for me." Over the next 2 days, the forced intimacy of the cabin, combined with the extreme danger, forged an intense, dramatic bond. Daniel, a man accustomed to silence, found himself talking, not about his pain, but about the structure of a just legal system, about the difference between fear and respect. Lucy, in turn, revealed herself to be sharp-witted and surprisingly fierce. She didn't weep, she strategized. One night, looking into the fire, Daniel saw the fire reflected in her determined eyes. He realized she wasn't just a victim, she was a catalyst. His heart, long a cold, hard knot of grief, began to thaw in the unexpected warmth of her presence. The love was not gentle, it was a gritty, urgent need. The love of 2 survivors clinging to the last raft in the storm. "You're a good woman, Lucy," he admitted one evening, his voice barely audible. She looked up. "And you're a better man than you let the world believe. Daniel Hawkwood, you risked everything for a stranger."
"I risked nothing," he said, but his hand reached out tentatively and brushed the copper mark on her left hand. His touch was firm, protective. I found a reason to fight again. The air between them crackled with the drama of their shared destiny, a powerful motion toward something raw and essential. On the 3rd day, a harsh, unforeseen blizzard swept down from the high peaks, trapping them in the lost spur. The wind howled like 1,000 vengeful spirits. It was during the thickest whiteout that a knock, a heavy, deliberate thud came at the door. Daniel, instantly on edge, gripped the rifle he kept resting against the jamb. "No one comes this far unless they're lost or sent," he muttered. Just as he spoke, an envelope, sodden and crumpled, was shoved through the crack beneath the door. It was a letter penned in a frantic, spidery script. "Mr. Hawkwood, Miss Albright. I am Eliza from the Crust and Crumb. I can't live with this sin. I saw John Thorne steal the bread. He threatened my family. I am too weak to stand up to Mayor Thorne, but I am sending this to warn you. He sent 2 of his best men, Huxley and Rourke, to silence you both. Please survive. This is my small support." Daniel read it aloud, his eyes narrowed. "They were sent. John is cleaning up his mess." Suddenly the wooden door slammed inward, ripped from its hinges by 2 huge, heavily coated men. Huxley, the larger one, lunged at Daniel, knocking the rifle aside. Rourke grabbed a chair and smashed it, using a jagged leg as a club. The fight was brutal, fueled by the cold and the desperation of the attackers. Daniel fought with the methodical, dangerous efficiency of a former lawman, but the surprise and the weight of 2 opponents pinned him to the floor. They were stomping him, aiming for his head. Lucy, watching in horror, refused to be the cause of his death. Her mind raced. The lantern. It was a heavy brass one, burning whale oil. With a silent cry of pure grit, she grabbed the lantern from the table. It was scalding hot, but she didn't care. With a terrifying surge of strength, she swung the heavy brass base of the lantern, connecting with a sickening crack against the side of Huxley's head. He roared and stumbled back, clutching his face, momentarily blinded by oil and pain. Rourke turned to face the new threat, distracted. That was all Daniel needed. With a guttural grunt, he shoved Rourke off him, lunged to his feet, and delivered a bone-crushing right cross that sent the second thug spiraling backward into the broken doorframe, unconscious. The battle was over in a flurry of grunts and flying oil. Daniel staggered, wiping blood from his lip, his eyes alight with a terrifying mix of pain and triumph. He looked at Lucy, who stood trembling, the lantern still smoking in her hand. "A lamp," he gasped, a faint smile touching his bloodied face. "A fine weapon, Miss Albright." They worked quickly, tying the two stunned thugs with thick leather straps, then bundling them onto the backs of their horses. The blizzard was still raging, but their purpose was suddenly clear. They had the witness Eliza's letter, and the proof John's henchman. "We're going back," Daniel announced, checking the knots. "Right now. We bring the proof to the center of the town, where they tried to hang you. We face the darkness and the light." Lucy, exhausted but resolute, nodded. "It is time Redemption Point learned the truth of the Thorns."
The ride back through the swirling snow was a cold eternity. They arrived in Redemption Point just after dawn. The town square still dusted white. Daniel and Lucy rode their horses directly into the middle of the street, pulling the two bound half-frozen men behind them. The sight of the infamous rogue and the hanged girl, very much alive and backed by two subdued, recognizable thugs, caused a sensation. A crowd quickly gathered, murmuring in confusion and fear. Mayor Thorne and John, alerted by a panicked deputy, arrived moments later, their faces hardening into identical masks of shock and fury. Daniel did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. He commanded attention through sheer chilling presence. "These men," Daniel declared, pointing to the tied thugs, "are the thugs of John Thorne. They were sent to assassinate Miss Albright and me to silence the truth about the theft of the 100 loaves." He pulled the crumpled, oil-stained letter from his coat and thrust it at Sheriff Vance. Sheriff read this aloud. "Now." The sheriff, finally seeing an end to the corrupt reign of the Thorns, read Eliza's testimony in a shaking voice, detailing John's actions and the fear that kept the baker's staff silent. When the reading was finished, Daniel dropped the letter and pointed at Huxley and Rourke. "The letter is the word. These men, attackers and would-be murderers, are the proof. John Thorne stole the bread, and his father sentenced an innocent woman to death to cover his son's crime and his own ruinous ambition." The mood of the crowd shifted violently. Seeing the thugs, men they recognized, tied up and hearing the documented accusation from one of their own, broke the spell of fear the Thorns had cast. The drama of the rescue, the near murder, and the brave resistance of Daniel and Lucy had finally given them the courage to act. A roar went up from the townsfolk, the sound of betrayal and righteous anger. John Thorne tried to flee, but was instantly mobbed. Mayor Silas Thorne, his face ash-gray, tried to invoke his authority, but his voice was drowned out by the cries for justice. Within the hour, the townsmen, empowered by Daniel's defiance, ensured that John and his family were forcibly thrown out of Redemption Point, stripped of their properties and their power. Mayor Thorne was given no choice but to resign his post in disgrace, leaving the town leaderless and clean. It was Daniel Hawkwood, the man who walked away from the law and into the wilderness, who stepped forward to fill the void. His first act as the new interim mayor was to restore order and ensure that the food stolen was repaid to Baker Thomas. He was no politician, but he was fiercely honest, a man of action, and a symbol of the town's new, hard-won integrity. Months later, Redemption Point had changed. The dusty air still held grit, but it also held hope. In the small, sun-drenched chapel rebuilt after the Thorns' departure, Daniel, finally wearing a clean suit and a peaceful smile, stood beside Lucy. He took her left hand, the one with the small copper mark, and placed a simple silver wedding band on her finger. "You brought me back to life, Lucy Albright," Daniel whispered, his voice thick with the love and gritty emotion that had bloomed in the face of death. "You were the reason I had to fight again." Lucy looked at him, her eyes shining. "And you gave me a voice, Daniel. You gave me justice. Now let's build this town into something worthy of its name." They rode out of the chapel together, not fleeing this time, but welcomed by the cheers of a free town. Two souls forever bound by a cut rope, a brass lantern, and the unyielding promise of a new life together.
If you enjoy our Western stories, consider subscribing. It really helps us keep creating more for you.